My brother smashed my daughter's MacBook Pro M3 because she wouldn't lend it to his son. Then he sneered. This is what happens when kids don't have a father to teach them manners. My parents didn't stop him. They piled on, calling her selfish and saying she deserved it. My 10-year-old just sat there, tears streaming down her face on the night she graduated elementary school. I stayed silent for the moment. But when they finally realized what I'd done in response, they panicked. All right, grab your coffee because this is some serious family drama you're not going to believe. I'm Teresa, 43. 4 years ago, my husband was killed in a car accident on his way home from work. One moment he was there, the next I was planning a funeral and figuring out how to raise our daughter Everly alone. She was only 6 back then. These days, she's 10, smart as can be, and the absolute light of my life. I run a small chain of 3 convenience stores here in the Miami suburbs. It's not glamorous, but the hours are flexible enough that I can be there for drop-offs, pickups, school events, everything that matters. Everly and I have built a quiet little routine together, just the two of us against the world. What happened that night at her elementary graduation dinner flipped everything upside down and exposed cracks in my family I could no longer ignore. If you're into real family drama with consequences that actually hit hard, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel bring you more stories like this. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. Let's get into it. The evening was supposed to be a triumph. Everly had worked herself to the bone all year. In the US, the transition from elementary to middle school is a huge milestone, and she had handled it with grace despite the looming shadow of her father's absence. I decided to pull out all the stops. I decorated the backyard of our home with strings of warm Edison bulbs and blue and white streamers to match her school colors. I had a local Italian place cater her favorites, baked ziti, garlic knots, and a massive chocolate cake. Everything was perfect until my brother, Hunter, arrived with his wife Kendra and their 8-year-old son, Beckett. Hunter has always been the golden child of the family. Even though he's nearly 40, my parents treat him like a prodigy whose big break is just around the corner. He's spent his life jumping from one failed freelance venture to another, usually funded by my parents' dwindling retirement savings. When the time came for gifts, I brought out the silver-wrapped box. Everly's eyes went wide. She's a quiet kid, but she loves technology and art. When she peeled back the paper and saw the Apple logo on the MacBook Pro M3 box, she actually gasped. It was the $2,000 model, something I'd saved for 6 months, picking up extra shifts at my stores and cutting back on my own expenses. Is that the M3? Beckett screamed, his voice piercing the celebration. He didn't even say congratulations. He just saw a shiny new toy. He ran over, his hands still sticky from the pizza, and tried to grab it. Everly pulled it back instinctively. Beckett, wait. It's brand new. I haven't even turned it on yet. I want to play Minecraft. Give it. Beckett yelled, turning to his dad. Hunter didn't skip a beat. He didn't tell his son to wait or be polite. Instead, he looked at Everly with a look of pure disdain. Come on, Everly. Don't be a gatekeeper. Your cousin wants to use it. Share the wealth. It's not a toy, Uncle Hunter, Everly said, her voice trembling. It's for my school projects and my art. I don't want it to get broken. That was the trigger. Hunter stood up, his face reddening. Oh, so now you're better than us? Because your mom buys you expensive things we can't afford? You're becoming a spoiled little brat, Everly. I stepped in. Hunter, that's enough. It's her graduation gift. She doesn't have to share it 5 seconds after opening it. He ignored me. He reached down and snatched the laptop out of her lap. Everly was crying now, begging him to give it back. Hunter held it above his head, laughing. My parents sat on the outdoor sofa, watching. I expected my father to stand up and tell Hunter to grow up. Instead, my dad sighed and said, Teresa, she really is being selfish. Family shares. Maybe Hunter needs to show her how things work. Hunter looked at Everly, who was sobbing at his feet. He looked at the beautiful, sleek machine in his hands, a symbol of the success he never had. He didn't just drop it. He gripped the edges and slammed it face down onto the concrete patio with a force that made the glasses on the table rattle. The sound of the screen shattering was sickening. It wasn't just a crack, it was a total destruction. The aluminum frame was bent, and the glass was a spiderweb of shards. The silence that followed was heavy. Everly let out a strangled cry and collapsed next to the broken pieces. Hunter just stood there, dusted his hands off, and delivered the line that changed my life. This is what happens when kids don't have a father to teach them manners. No discipline in this house. My mother walked over, but not to comfort Everly. She looked at the broken laptop and then at me. Well, Teresa, it's just a computer. Maybe if you didn't spoil her so much, she wouldn't have pushed her uncle to that point. She deserved this lesson. I felt a coldness wash over me. No screaming. No fighting. Just a crystalline realization that the people standing in my backyard weren't my family. They were intruders. The silence that followed Hunter's outburst was louder than the sound of the laptop shattering. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching my daughter's small frame shake with every sob. The Edison bulbs above us, which I had hung with such care to create a magical evening, now felt like interrogation lights, exposing the ugliness of the people I shared blood with. Hunter didn't look remorseful. He looked satisfied. He adjusted his shirt, took a final swig of his beer, and gestured toward Beckett as if he had just performed a public service. Kendra was already gathering her things, muttering about how the vibe was ruined and how they shouldn't have to stay where they weren't appreciated. My parents stood up slowly, their faces set in masks of stern disapproval. Not a single one of them reached out to Everly. Not a single one of them offered an apology. "Get out," I said. My voice wasn't loud. It was hollow, like air moving through a graveyard. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Teresa," my mother sighed, waving a hand dismissively. "Stop being so dramatic. We'll go, but only because you're clearly having some kind of episode. You need to get your emotions under control if you're going to raise that girl right." They filed out like a funeral procession for my patience. As the front door clicked shut, the weight of the night finally hit me. I sank to the floor next to Everly. Valerie, who had been frozen in shock in the corner of the patio, immediately moved into action. She didn't say a word to me yet. She just knelt by Everly and gathered her into a hug so tight it seemed like she was trying to hold the girl's broken heart together. "It's okay." Eventually, Valerie got Everly upstairs and into bed. "It's just a thing." I stayed on the patio, staring at the shattered remains of the MacBook. "You are irreplaceable." In the dark, the shards of glass caught the moonlight, looking like diamonds scattered on the ground. But I knew they were just trash. Just like the relationship I had tried so hard to maintain with my brother and my parents. To understand why I didn't just scream and shout, you have to understand the years of invisible labor I had performed for this family. For over a decade, I had been the silent engine keeping the Miller family from stalling out. After my dad's sure bet investment in a sham real estate company wiped out 70% of their retirement fund, they were drowning. They were 65 years old and looking at the very real possibility of moving into a state-subsidized trailer park. I stepped in. I was 33 at the time, pregnant with Everly and running my first store. I bought a charming 3-bedroom house in a quiet cul-de-sac, a house that should have been an investment for my daughter's future college fund. Instead, I let my parents move in. I told them they only had to pay enough to cover the property taxes and insurance, about $800. I covered the rest, the mortgage, the maintenance, the skyrocketing Florida home insurance premiums. I was effectively gifting them nearly $20,000 a year in housing costs alone. But it didn't stop there. My mother would call me every other week with a crisis. The car made a weird noise. The refrigerator was acting up. Her knee surgery copay was higher than expected. And every time, I wrote a check. I set up an automated transfer of $1,000 every month just so they wouldn't have to worry about groceries. And then there was Hunter. While I was working 16-hour days at the convenience stores, dealing with shoplifters and broken freezers, Hunter was finding himself. He was the golden child. When he got Kendra pregnant, my parents begged me to give him a job at one of the stores. I did. He lasted 3 weeks before he quit, because he felt demeaned by having to stock shelves. My parents didn't blame him. They blamed me for not giving him a managerial role immediately. I remembered a specific Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I had spent the morning working the holiday shift at the store so my employees could be with their families. I arrived at my parents' house, the house I paid for, with a pre-ordered turkey and all the sides. Hunter was there, bragging about a new cryptocurrency he was investing in. My dad toasted to Hunter's ambition and entrepreneurial spirit. When Everly, who was 7 then, excitedly showed my mom a drawing she had won an award for at school, my mom barely looked at it before turning back to Hunter. "So, tell us more about this Bitcoin, honey. You're so smart to get in on the ground floor." I sat there, the reliable one, the bank, the silent daughter, and I felt the first cracks then. I realized that my success was only valuable to them because it fueled Hunter's lifestyle and my parents' comfort. They didn't love me for who I was, they loved me for what I provided. And tonight, they had crossed the ultimate line. They had allowed Hunter to take his frustration with his own life out on a 10-year-old orphan who had done nothing but excel. They had used my husband's death, the greatest tragedy of my life, as a weapon to shame a little girl. As I sat on that patio, the Florida humidity clinging to my skin, the reliable Teresa died. The woman who paid the bills, who smoothed over the arguments, who accepted the crumbs of affection they tossed her way, she was gone. I picked up the shattered MacBook. I didn't throw it away. I put it in a silk bag and walked into my office. I had work to do. Not store inventory, and not bill paying. I was about to conduct a masterclass in accountability. Valerie. I called out as she came down the stairs. She's asleep, Valerie said, her eyes red. Teresa, what are you going to do? You can't just let this go. That was evil. I'm not letting it go, Val, I said, opening my laptop, my own, working laptop. I'm ending it. All of it. I logged into my bank portal. My thumb hovered over the cancel recurring transfer button for the $1,000 I sent my parents every month. My heart hammered against my ribs. For a split second, the old guilt flared up. They're your parents. They'll starve. Then I pictured Everly's face on the floor. I pictured Hunter's sneer. Click. The transfer was gone. That was just the beginning. The next morning, the sun rose over Miami with a brutal, unforgiving brightness. Usually, the sound of the birds and the hum of the morning traffic gave me a sense of peace, but today, the air felt charged. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours. I had spent the night in my home office, surrounded by spreadsheets, bank statements, and property deeds. The more I looked at the numbers, the more disgusted I became with myself. I hadn't just been helping my family, I had been subsidizing their cruelty. Everly came downstairs around 8 a.m. Her eyes were swollen, and she moved with a heaviness that no 10-year-old should carry. She looked at the spot on the patio through the glass door, likely expecting to see the ghost of her broken gift. Morning, honey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I made pancakes. She sat at the kitchen island, picking at a piece of fruit. Mom? Is Uncle Hunter mad at me? That question broke my heart into a million pieces. Even after he had destroyed her most prized possession and insulted her deceased father, her first instinct was to wonder if she had done something wrong. This was the result of years of watching me placate my parents and brother. She had learned that their feelings were the priority. No, Everly, I said, sitting across from her. Uncle Hunter is not mad at you. Uncle Hunter was wrong. Very, very wrong. And Grandma and Grandpa were wrong for not stopping him. I want you to listen to me. You did nothing to deserve that. From now on, things are going to be different. I promise. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't quite believe me. She had seen me promise to talk to them before, only for me to fold the moment my mother mentioned her failing health, or my father talked about family unity. After Valerie arrived to take Everly to the beach for the day, a much-needed distraction, I got to work. My first stop wasn't the store. It was the local police precinct. I walked in with a heavy folder. In it was the receipt for the MacBook, $2,139 with taxes, the printed-out warranty information, and a USB drive containing the crystal-clear footage from my backyard security camera. The officer at the desk, a seasoned man named Sergeant Miller, watched the video. I saw his jaw tighten when Hunter slammed the laptop down. "Is that your brother, he asked. "Yes," I replied. "And that's my daughter crying in the background." In the state of Florida, the sergeant explained, criminal mischief is a felony if the damage is over $1,000. This is very clearly intentional. Do you want to press charges? I want a full report filed, I said. And I want a case number. I need everything documented for what comes next. Once the police report was in my hand, I drove to the house my parents lived in. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt a wave of nausea. I had spent so much money making this place perfect for them. I didn't go inside. I'd paid for the new roof, I walked to the front door and taped a legal-sized envelope to the wood. Inside was a formal notice to quit. Since they didn't have a signed long-term lease, Florida law allowed me to terminate their month-to-month tenancy with 30 days' notice. I also included a letter from my attorney, which I had drafted and signed electronically an hour prior, stating that the family discount on rent was officially revoked. If they wanted to stay for the final month, they owed the full market rate of $2,500, due in 5 days. As I was walking back to my car, my mother opened the door. She was wearing a silk robe I'd bought her for Christmas. "Teresa, what are you doing here so early? I was just about to call you. Hunter is very upset, you know. He says you were very rude to Kendra last night." I turned around, my hand on the car door. "Did you read the envelope, Mom?" "The envelope? No, She pulled it off the door and scanned the first page. Her face went from confused to pale in seconds. "Teresa, this says eviction notice. This has to be a joke." "It's not a joke," I said. "I also cancelled the $1,000 monthly transfer this morning. You have 30 days to find a new place to live. I'd suggest calling the Golden Child. Maybe he can house you in one of his freelance offices." "You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the quiet street. "We're your parents. We're seniors. It's illegal to throw us out." "It's perfectly legal when I own the deed and you've violated the terms of our verbal agreement by allowing my property, and my daughter's well-being, to be destroyed under your roof," I replied. "I'll see you in court, Mom." I drove away, leaving her standing on the porch, clutching the papers to her chest. My phone started vibrating before I even reached the end of the block. Hunter calling. Kendra calling. Dad calling. I didn't answer. I went to my office at the main store, sat down with a cup of black coffee, and began the process of auditing my life. I looked at the convenience store accounts. I had been borrowing from my own business's growth fund to pay for my brother's mistakes and my parents' comfort. No more. Around noon, Kendra sent a text that made me realize they still didn't get it. "Teresa, you're being insane. Hunter had a bad night. He's willing to give Everly $50 to help fix the screen if you stop this nonsense. You're scaring the grandparents. Grow up." I stared at the screen. $50? The screen replacement alone was $700, and the frame was bent. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the fact that they thought my daughter's trauma was worth $50. I called my lawyer, Keith. "Keith, I want to move forward with the civil suit. I want the maximum allowed for property damage, and I want to file for a temporary restraining order for Everly. Hunter's comments about her father and his physical aggression have made her feel unsafe in her own home." "You got it, Teresa," Keith said. "But you know this is going to get ugly, right? They're going to play the family card hard." "Let them," I said, looking at a photo of David and Everly on my desk. "I've been paying for that family card for years. It's time I finally cashed it in." The afternoon was a blur of phone calls and emails. I contacted the middle school Everly was supposed to start in the fall and removed my parents and Hunter from the emergency contact list. I gave the school a copy of the police report and told them that under no circumstances was anyone other than myself or Valerie allowed to pick her up. By 5 p.m., the panic I mentioned earlier had fully set in. My father had left a voicemail, his voice shaking. "Teresa, the bank says the mortgage payment for this house didn't go through. They're saying the account is closed. We don't have that kind of money in our checking. You're going to make us homeless. Call me right now." I didn't call him. I sent a single text to the family group chat. "The bank account is closed because the woman who funded it is closed. Hunter said Everly needed to learn manners. I decided the whole family needs to learn responsibility. Every bill, every payment, and every favor stops today. If you want to talk, you can talk to my lawyer. Goodbye." I exited the group chat and blocked all of them. For the first time in 4 years, the silence felt like a victory. The silence following my exit from the group chat was short-lived. Even though I had blocked their primary numbers, the desperation of a parasitic family is a powerful force. By the next morning, my store managers were calling me, sounding confused and stressed. My mother had physically shown up at my flagship store, crying to the cashier and telling customers that her heartless daughter was leaving her to starve. I arrived at the store to find my mother sitting on a stool near the lottery counter, a crumpled tissue in her hand. She looked every bit the frail grandmother, a role she played to perfection whenever she needed something. "Teresa," she wailed the moment she saw me. "The neighbors saw the police at Hunter's house this morning. They arrested him in front of Beckett. How could you do that to your own brother? He's a father. He should have thought about being a father before he attacked a child, I said, my voice cold and loud enough for the customers to hear. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative in my own place of business. Hunter committed a felony, Mom. If you want to be mad at someone, be mad at the man who slammed a $2,000 laptop on the ground in a fit of rage. It was a mistake, she hissed, her tone shifting from frail to vicious in a heartbeat. He was stressed. You have everything, and he has nothing. You're supposed to help him, not destroy him. I have everything because I work 16 hours a day, I replied. I've helped him for 10 years. That ends now. You have 29 days left in that house. I suggest you stop spending your time crying in my store and start looking for a packing service. I had my manager escort her out. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, watching my own mother be walked out of a convenience store like a common shoplifter, but I knew that if I gave an inch, they would take a mile. Later that afternoon, Keith, my lawyer, called me with an update. Teresa, the civil suit has been filed. We're seeking $15,000. That covers the MacBook, the emotional distress, and a punitive component because the act was intentional and malicious. Also, because Hunter was arrested on the felony charge, the court is likely to grant the temporary restraining order, TRO, for Everly automatically as part of his bail conditions. What about my parents? I asked. They've already contacted a tenant advocacy group, Keith said with a sigh. They're trying to claim that because you've paid their bills for so long, there's an implied life estate or a long-term lease. It's a weak argument, but it might buy them an extra month in court. However, since the house is in your name alone and you've been paying the taxes, they don't have a leg to stand on in the long run. They're just stalling. Let them stall, I said. Every day they stay past the 30-day mark, I'm filing the next few weeks damages. Were a war of attrition. I want them to realize that the free ride hasn't just stopped, thanks to Valerie's going into reverse and a few sessions with a child therapist I'd hired. We sat together one evening, and I showed her the new MacBook I'd bought to replace the broken one. Is Uncle Hunter going to break this one, too? She asked quietly. No, honey, I said, hugging her. Uncle Hunter isn't allowed to come within 500 feet of you. The law says so. And Grandma and Grandpa won't be coming over for a while, either. We're taking a big break from them. I miss them, she whispered. But I'm also scared of them. Is that bad? It's not bad at all, I told her. It's your brain telling you that you deserve to be treated with respect. And I'm going to make sure you always are. Meanwhile, Hunter's life was spiraling. Without my monthly subsidies to my parents, they could no longer afford to give Hunter loans that he never paid back. Kendra, his wife, had to take a job working the night shift at a warehouse just to keep their electricity on. Hunter was out on bail, but he was facing a felony record that would make him unhireable in almost any field. The golden child was finally feeling the weight of the real world. The climax of the legal battle happened at the preliminary hearing for the civil suit. I sat on one side of the room with Keith. On the other side sat Hunter, Kendra, and my parents. They looked haggard. Hunter was wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit, and my father refused to look me in the eye. Hunter's lawyer, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, tried to argue that the laptop was already damaged and that Hunter was simply disciplining a child in a family setting. Keith didn't even argue. He simply stood up and played the video on a large monitor in the courtroom. The judge watched in silence as Hunter snatched the laptop. She watched as Everly cried. She watched as Hunter delivered his line about David and slammed the device down. When the video ended, the judge looked over her glasses at Hunter. Mr. Miller, the judge said, her voice dripping with disdain. In my 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a pathetic display of adult bullying. You didn't discipline anyone. You threw a tantrum and destroyed the property of a minor. And the comments regarding the child's deceased father? Those speak to a level of malice that this court finds deeply disturbing. She turned to the lawyers. I am granting the full $15,000 judgment to the plaintiff. I am also making the restraining order permanent for the next 3 years. And as for the eviction, she looked at my parents, you have 14 days to vacate. Their implied lease argument is dismissed. This woman has supported you for years out of the goodness of her heart, and you repaid her by enabling the abuse of her daughter. This court is finished. As we walked out of the courtroom, my father finally spoke. Teresa, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around. You've won, he said, his voice cracking. We have nowhere to go. Hunter is ruined. We're losing the house. Are you happy? Is this what you wanted? I turned around then. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man I had spent 6 figures trying to protect, and I felt nothing. No anger. No pity. Just peace. What I wanted, I said slowly, was for my daughter to have a grandfather who protected her. What I wanted was a brother who didn't hate my success. You chose Hunter's ego over Everly's safety. You didn't lose your home because of me, Dad. You lost it because you thought my love had no limits. You were wrong. I walked away, Valerie's arm linked in mine. We went straight to a celebratory dinner, just the 3 of us. Everly, Valerie, and me. Life in Miami is different now. It's quieter. My parents moved to a small, cramped apartment 3 towns over. Hunter is working a manual labor job and paying off his debt to me in small, court-ordered increments. They don't call anymore. They know I won't answer. Every Friday night, Everly and I sit on the patio, the same patio where the laptop was broken. We have a new laptop, new memories, and a new rule: only people who bring light into this house are allowed through the door. And for the first time in 4 years, I know David would be proud of me. I didn't just raise our daughter alone, I defended her. The legal victory in the courtroom felt like a weight being lifted, but as any business owner knows, when you start pulling on a loose thread, the whole sweater begins to unravel. After the judge ordered the $15,000 judgment and the eviction, I thought the worst was behind us. I thought I could go back to my routine at the convenience stores and focus on Everly. But my intuition was screaming at me. You see, for the last year, I had noticed small discrepancies in the inventory and the cash flow at my largest store, the one where I had allowed Hunter to hang out and help during his transition between failed freelance gigs. I had always brushed it off as clerical errors or minor shoplifting. I was too busy being the family's safety net to realize that the person I was catching was the one I shared a last name with. 2 days after the court hearing, I locked myself in the back office of my main store with 3 years' worth of digital ledgers and a pot of coffee. I spent 14 hours straight cross-referencing Hunter's visits with cash drops and inventory logs. What I found made my blood run cold. Hunter hadn't just been borrowing money through my parents. He had been systematically stealing from the registers. He knew the manager's override codes I had foolishly shared with him during a family emergency 3 years ago. He was taking $200 here, $400 there, disguised as vendor payments or damaged goods write-offs. When I totaled it up, the amount was staggering, nearly $22,000 over 18 months. I sat in the dark office, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in the tears I finally allowed myself to shed. This wasn't just about a broken laptop. This was a calculated, long-term betrayal. While I was paying for his son's soccer gear and his parents' roof, he was literally reaching into my pockets and taking more. I didn't call the police this time. Not yet. I called my CPA and had her verify the findings. Once I had a certified audit in my hand, I sent a copy to Hunter's lawyer with a simple note: I have proof of $22,000 in grand theft. I won't file the criminal charges if Hunter signs over his interest in the family's small vacation cabin in North Carolina, the one left to us by our grandfather that Hunter has been squatting in for summers. The response was instant. Hunter knew he was cornered. The cabin was the only thing of value he had left. He signed the deed over to me within 48 hours. I didn't want the cabin for myself. I put it into a trust for Everly's college education. I was taking back every piece of the family legacy that he had tried to poison. Meanwhile, the eviction was reaching its bitter end. My parents had spent the last week calling Valerie, begging her to intervene. They had reached out to old family friends, aunts, and uncles, weaving a tale of a cruel, power-hungry daughter who was putting them on the street. I received a call from my Aunt Beatrice, my mother's sister. Teresa, dear, how can you do this? They are your parents. Where is your Christian charity? To put them out over a computer? Aunt B.A., I said, my voice tired but firm. Did Mom tell you that Hunter smashed the laptop while telling my daughter she was a fatherless brat? Did she tell you that I've given them over $100,000 in the last 4 years while they watched Hunter steal from me? Did she tell you that when Everly was crying on the floor, they told her she deserved it? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. They didn't mention that part, Beatrice whispered. No, they wouldn't, I said. Because then they'd have to admit they aren't the victims. They are the enablers. If you're so concerned about their housing, you're more than welcome to let them move into your guest room. but they are never stepping foot on my property again." Beatrice hung up. Surprisingly, she didn't offer them a room. The day of the move was a Tuesday. I hired a professional moving crew to pack their things. I didn't want them to have the excuse that they couldn't afford to move. I paid for the truck and a storage unit for 3 months. I watched from my car as the movers carried out the furniture I had bought for them. I saw my mother standing on the sidewalk, clutching her favorite lamp, looking small and defeated. My father walked over to my car. He tapped on the window. I rolled it down halfway. "We're going to a 1-bedroom in Hialeah," he said. "It's near the train tracks. Your mother can't sleep with that noise." "Then I guess Hunter should have bought some earplugs with the $22,000 he stole from my registers," I replied. My father's face dropped. He didn't know about the theft. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't want to admit it. "We're your family, Teresa. One day, you'll be old, and Everly will do this to you. You've set a cold example." "No, Dad," I said, looking him in the eye. "I've set an example that says love is a two-way street. I've taught Everly that she doesn't have to set herself on fire to keep people warm who wouldn't even hand her a glass of water. I hope you find peace in Hialeah. But don't call me again." As they drove away in their old sedan, following the moving truck, I felt a strange sense of mourning. Not for them, but for the family I thought I had. I realized that David's death hadn't created the cracks in our family. It had simply removed the person who was willing to ignore them. David always told me I was too generous for my own good. I finally understood what he meant. Everly and I spent that evening in her room. She was busy using her new MacBook Pro to create a digital art piece. It was a picture of a lighthouse in the middle of a storm. "Who's in the lighthouse, Evie?" I asked. "Us," she said, without looking up. "And Aunt Valerie. The storm is everyone else." I realized then that children see so much more than we give them credit for. She knew the storm had passed. She knew we were safe. And as the evening sun dipped below the Miami horizon, casting long, golden shadows across her room, I knew that every legal fee, every confrontation, and every dollar lost was worth the look of absolute security on my daughter's face. But the world has a way of testing you one last time. And 2 weeks later, I would find myself face to face with Hunter in a way I never expected. The days following the eviction were strangely quiet. It was the kind of silence you only experience after a massive hurricane has passed. The wind stops howling, but the landscape is forever changed. I spent my time focusing on the business, ensuring that the new security protocols at my stores were airtight. No more family discounts, no more manager override codes for people who didn't have a paycheck stub from me. I was reclaiming my life, brick by brick. But I knew Hunter wouldn't go quietly into the night. A man like that, driven by ego and fueled by a lifetime of being told he's special, doesn't handle a total loss well. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was at my main office, going over the quarterly projections, when the front door chime rang. My heart skipped a beat when I saw him on the security monitor. Hunter looked like a ghost of his former self. He hadn't shaved in days, his clothes were wrinkled, and the golden child swagger was completely gone. He looked desperate. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the intercom. "Hunter, you're violating the restraining order. You need to leave before I press the silent alarm." "Teresa, please." His voice crackled through the speaker, sounding thin and desperate. "Kendra left me. She took Beckett to her mother's in Orlando. She says she won't come back until I have a real house and a real job. My own wife, Teresa. After everything I did for her." "You didn't do anything for her, Hunter," I said, my voice flat. "You lived off me and Mom and Dad. And now that the well is dry, she's gone. That's how life works for people like you." "I need a loan, just $5,000, he begged, leaning his forehead against the glass. "I'll pay you back from the freelance work I have lined up. I swear. Mom and Dad are living in a dump, Teresa. It smells like mold and the neighbors scream all night. Do you really want that on your conscience?" I looked at the monitor, at the man who had called my daughter a fatherless brat while smashing her dreams on the floor. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was quickly extinguished by the memory of Everly's tears. "My conscience is clear, Hunter," I replied. "I'm not the one who broke a child's heart. I'm the one who fixed it. You have 30 seconds to get in your car, or the police will be here to pick you up. This is your only warning." He let out a scream of pure, unadulterated rage and kicked the door. The tempered glass didn't break, but the sound echoed through the office. He looked into the camera, his eyes wild. You think you've won? You've just lost your family. You're going to die alone in these stores, Teresa. Just like David died alone on that road. The mention of David was the final nail in the coffin. I didn't say another word. I pressed the silent alarm. Within 4 minutes, a patrol car pulled into the lot. Hunter tried to run, but he didn't get far. Watching him being handcuffed and pushed into the back of a cruiser was the final closure I didn't know I needed. He was charged with violating a protective order and stalking. That evening, I went home and found Emily and Valerie in the kitchen. They were baking cookies, the house smelling of vanilla and sugar. It was a scene of domestic peace that I had fought a literal war to protect. I sat them both down and told them what happened. I didn't hide the ugly parts. Emily needed to know that actions have consequences, and Valerie needed to know that the threat was finally neutralized. Is it finally over, Mom? Emily asked, her hand in mine. It is, honey, I said. We're starting a new chapter. A real one. But as I looked at Valerie, I realized that while our internal family battle had been won, there was still so much more to the story. There was the secret my parents were still hiding about David's life insurance. There was the mystery of why Hunter felt so entitled to my money in the first place. And most importantly, there was a shocking discovery I made in my father's old desk that changed everything I thought I knew about my own childhood.